Hello, and welcome to the Embrace Balance, Discover Joy podcast. I'm Amanda Butland, your host and intuitive life coach. All right, welcome to another episode of the Embrace Balance, Discover Joy podcast. Today, my special guest is Brenda Bobby. Brenda, thank you so much for being on with me today.
Oh, thank you for having me.
So, I always like to start out with a little icebreaker question. Would you mind sharing with us what activity or hobby brings you the most joy and why?
I think the activity that brings me the most joy is going to the beach. I live in Santa Monica, California, 16 blocks from the beach, and I try to go several times a week and just get my feet in the sand, get my feet in the water, and just try to pause and notice some things around me that I wouldn't notice if I was just hastily running through life. So that,
Hmm.
that brings me joy and peace.
Oh, I love that. Going to the beach is one of my favorite things to do as well. And I don't live near the beach, but
Uh,
Southern California beaches are one of my favorite places to go.
Yes, actually teach beach yoga, and it's my absolute favorite thing to
Oh,
teach. Yeah.
oh, nice. That must be beautiful. Like, do you do it around like the sunrise or the sunset?
Yes. Hmm.
That must be amazing. That would be
Yeah.
really, really, I would love to do something like that
Well, come to
sometime.
Southern California and we'll do it together.
Awesome. So we're here to talk about coaching.
Yes.
Would you mind sharing with us maybe a little bit about, because I know you're a coach as well, but
Mhm.
I'm wondering if you would mind sharing sort of like your coaching journey, like how you got to be where you are today, and what you do, maybe.
Yeah, sure. So I started out as a dancer and dance educator. I started my own business and had it for 20 years, and I found myself doing a lot of life coaching and helping young women navigate life from a very early age all the way through college years and beyond. And I really enjoyed it, but I did get burned out at one point. It was just I had gone through a divorce and I had 4 kids and I was running this huge business and traveling every weekend, and it just got to be a lot. And so I started to pivot and do some other things and did some freelance work. And then during COVID, I started getting back into one-on-one and personal coaching, both for adults and young adults. And when I started doing some self discovery work, I realized that there's a real disconnect in not just Western society, but in cultural in general regarding somatic practices. Dance is a very somatic exercise, and I also teach fitness, and I'm a huge yoga fan. I teach yoga, I practice yoga, and I noticed that we started to merge a lot of these somatic practices, but disengage from our body on a daily basis. And I felt like that disconnect was where a lot of things were falling to the wayside for society. And I consequently stuffed some personal traumas that had to do around sexual trauma. And when I started working through that, I started to notice how things were stored in my body, stored in my subconscious. And it led me into discovering what sex coaching was all about. And so about a year ago, I started on my journey as a sex coach, and I am currently a clinical sexologist in training. And I've tried to fuse my passion with movement and somatic work along with healthy coaching and helping young women embrace their sexuality, their femininity, and um, however that shows up for them. It doesn't have to be trauma related. It can just be, cultural or generational or societal guilt, shame, kind of not really sure how to navigate life when they're met with some challenging or uncomfortable situations that deal with their body, um, and or their femininity or sexuality.
I love that you focus on this because I think, like you mentioned, sort of that guilt and shame. I feel like there's so many women that have that sort of that feeling around it, around sex and their bodies and things like that. So to be able to help women, young women, with that, that's just such amazing work. So thank you so much for doing that. And I want to, because you mentioned somatic practices for a few times, for people that might not know what that is, would you mind sort of explaining what that means?
Yeah, so somatic practices when you're feeling in your body, in your presence, what is going on. Sometimes it's just sitting mindfully noticing how the breath moves. Sometimes it's moving with music. Sometimes it's moving in nature. Because I'm a dancer, I do a lot of stuff with rhythm and movement focused on dance based. But I also, like I said, teach yoga. I teach breath work and meditation. I teach wellness and health. I'm part time at UCLA and lead wellness programs that way. And they're all based in body awareness and movement. Connecting the mind, body, and spirit has been my primary focus for the last 4 or 5 years.
I love that what you mentioned about that connection between mind, body, and spirit, because you're right. People are often disconnected. I love how you bring movement into that, because unless you're sort of mindful of your body movement, you sometimes a lot of people are disconnected from their bodies and how it feels, and not just in maybe sexuality, but also just in everyday like health and wellness, like you mentioned, right? Like my body feels something here, but then it's not really, you're not thinking about it. Maybe there's an ache somewhere but you don't know where it's coming from or what it is. And maybe you take some pills to make the pain go away, but there's something behind that, right? There's a reason why there's some ache there. So I love sort of that um, holisticness that you bring to all of that.
Yeah, I at first I was a little concerned about how it would be viewed by I have 4 children, I'm studying clinical sexology. I'm going to be a sex coach. It's a little, it's not typical in Western culture, but my kids are a lot of the reason why I decided that this was so important. And as I've delved in deeper and the evolution of AI and virtual everything, we are becoming a disconnected society. And I feel like my job blending the somatic practices and feeling your body and then connecting with others. And it doesn't have to be in a sexual way, but we are sexual by design. It doesn't have to be gender related. It's about energy and connection and teaching people how to look each other in the eye and how to communicate again, because I see that that is going to be a huge difficult hurdle for generations to come as we move into this like sedentary life in front of a screen, in front of goggles on our eyes, becoming so disconnected from our physical form and from each other's physical form that I feel like I have job security now.
Yeah, absolutely. I love what you mentioned about just the disconnection that's really, really happened. And it's so much more noticeable since COVID, right? Because
Yeah.
everybody was on screens. They weren't in proximity to each other. There wasn't that connection. And so I think a lot of people, kids that grew up during that time, and especially through, key um, developmental phases, it's
Yeah.
really, really impacted that. And yeah, you see people oftentimes like struggle with like even interacting anymore with regular people in person because they're so used to being on screens and there's all that sort of there's so much focus now in schools, right, with social emotional awareness because COVID did impact so many kids, people during that time frame. So I love that you're bringing that here and what the work that you're doing
Yeah,
around that.
I'm very passionate about it. So I feel like if you're passionate about something, it doesn't feel like work. And so, although I was apprehensive with the topic of sex coaching, it can take very different forms. And, there are some that are very into heavy sexuality type issues. I have people in my class, my program right now, who are MDs who get very little training on that in their, medical field, and they want to delve deeper and help a lot of them are women, to be honest, and help them through some of these the issues that come up that have just never really been talked about. And our professionals aren't really educated the way they should be on those topics because it's kind of been pushed under the rug. I think the push of like perimenopause and menopausal symptoms and hormone replacement therapy and all of these things are just starting to come to the forefront and be talked about. Nobody would ever want to talk about that before. And so when you start talking about that, it impacts a person's life, it impacts how they move and feel in their body, and it definitely impacts their sexual health and well-being. And so I just feel like there's just a lot of things that we can bring together now that the dialogue can start to be opened by people who are willing to step out of their comfort zone and say, let's talk about this. And
Mm.
so I feel like I felt called to do it, and it's, a little uncomfortable for some people, but that's where growth happens.
Yeah, absolutely. That is where growth happens outside the comfort zone. I mean, that's what they say, right? It's you if
Yeah.
it was already like if it was comfortable or if it what is the saying? It's something like if the goal was in your comfort zone, you would have achieved it already. It's always outside your comfort zone. That's why
Yeah,
you
it's
haven't
always,
gotten it
yeah, you
yet.
always have to go through it. That's right.
But I love the conversation they bring because I think, you're right. People, I think, are more open to talking about these topics now than they were maybe, say 20 years ago. I mean, it really wasn't something that people were talking about at all. So it's like the prime time to be talking about this, and especially the need right now, right in this day and age, with post COVID and just reconnecting with people again. So there's such a need for that. So I love that you're doing this. Um, I wanted to come back to sort of that the sex coaching is not just about sex. I mean, it's like more. I mean, it could be just the somatic practices, like just connecting with your body more, or sensuality, or just feminine energy in general. Could you talk maybe a little bit more about just sort of that broad range of like what sex coaching involves? Because it's not just about sex.
Right. I totally agree with you on that. And I can really help women or men or non-binary or whoever wants help navigate how they envision their sexuality currently and how they want it to look in the future. So I'm not a therapist. I'm not pathologizing them. I'm not diagnosing them. I'm helping them achieve sexual health and pleasure. And the word pleasure sometimes even comes with like stigma of, oh, you shouldn't want, pleasure and desire, dirty words, but like we're humans and pleasure is enjoyable. We're all entitled to have pleasure and no pleasure. And so whether that is just knowing your body, helping navigate the physical mechanics of your body, I am shocked at how many women have never really been educated on their own lady parts and how they work. Um, not, I don't know how intricate you want me to get, or intimate, I should say, in this, but just the sheer physical makeup of men and women in their genitalia are very similar in structure, even though it doesn't present outwardly. If you really are to break it apart, it's really very similar. And by educating women and helping them feel empowered and not wrong, I'd say the first thing that people come is this normal? Everyone wants to know what's normal. And the truth is, in sex coaching, everything is normal because if you like it, there's definitely going to be someone else out there that likes it. And so we want people to feel comfortable coming and speaking about what their concerns are or what they envision their life to be in a better way.
Mm.
Um, I have found one topic that's very taboo, but it's becoming more mainstream is female ejaculation and how that happens, if it is a real thing or if it's not, and educating both partners on that and young people on it. I think that it's important. It's also important to know about how the body responds and how the brain responds. And this is a huge point for me because I have personal issues with this, but your body can respond and it's not an invitation or a yes. Your body can respond and you are not wanting something or necessarily being turned on by it because your body is reacting in a way. And I think that is one of the major hurdles for young people, especially in this whole date rape
Mm,
culture and, experimentation with, younger people because they assume that if their body's responding that then it must be that that's what they want, even though their brain
mm,
is telling them no. And I think it's all about education and understanding, and then knowing that there's no guilt and shame around how your body's responding, but your brain isn't sending that same signal.
mm.
So there's a lot of different, I'm so fascinated and fired up about so many different ways I can share what I've learned and what I'm learning and how I can help people. But I think for me, the most is just allowing women to feel okay to say that they enjoy sex, without being, shamed or being termed a slut or, provocative, that it's natural.
Mhm.
Sexuality is natural. It's part of the human experience. We wouldn't be here without sex. So, um, just to get rid of that stigma and enjoy that. So that's kind of why I feel like I can help anyone find their voice in their body and in their sexuality. And
Mhm.
they're really one and the same.
Yeah, I love that message, and how important it is to really educate because you're right that a lot of people don't. They don't understand how their body works. They don't necessarily know how all the parts work. So education, I love that message of how important it is, but also the empowerment, and the taking away like the shame, the stigma around,
Yes.
maybe wanting to be sexual or and like you mentioned, it's like, well, it's necessary for life, but for some reason, somewhere along the way, wanting sex has become a bad thing somewhere
Right.
at some point. I'm like, what? But it's necessary for life. So, yeah, and for the human species to continue. So, yeah, I love all of the things that you've shared. So important, and I can see, just how passionate you are about it. I love, just the obvious, passion and love that you have for educating people. I did want to come back to something that you mentioned earlier,
Sure.
because it fascinated me because you mentioned like how in the beginning when you were first starting down this journey, you weren't sure because you have 4 kids and as a mom. Um,
Mhm.
and I'm not sure how old your kids are, but I'm just curious, like now that you're like dip into it, how has that been with your kids? And how's that worked?
Well, I think I've always been comfortable in my femininity. I was a dancer, so I was used to wearing, less than most average moms did, when they worked out or when they, did certain somatic practices, yoga. I wasn't going in my, t-shirt and sweats. I was going in my cute little, yoga bra and, booty shorts or whatever. And I've always been kind of comfortable in my femininity. So I don't think my kids were surprised. My kids are older. My youngest is 20. My oldest is 30, almost 31. So they are older, but I do think that for me personally, in order to be taken seriously, I needed to evolve into this now that I'm in my 50s because I think it would be difficult for not just my children, but also anyone that wants to come to me to try and have this type of discussion with someone who maybe they feel like is doing it for a fad or for attention. And I'm not, that's not my goal. My goal is really to inspire and, like I said, empower people to seek and enjoy and ask for pleasure and feel all the feelings that they feel in their body. We've been given this miraculous physical form, and then somewhere along the way, we're told not to feel or pretend you don't feel, or let's not
Mhm.
talk about what you feel in those situations. So,
Yeah, yeah, no, I think that's very true about not talking about these things, right? Like it's been such a taboo subject for so
yeah.
long that to be able to even talk about it, it's sort of like, whoa, I'm not sure, right? For
Well,
a lot of
and
people
yeah,
still.
and I'm going to date myself, but I remember back when I was younger and I would stay home from school when I was sick, I would watch Phil Donahue. And once in a while, he'd have Dr. Ruth on. And I thought she was the best thing since sliced bread. She was this older little woman who talked about sex and said she liked it. And I was like, I want to be like her. When I was little, this was my like thing. And so, um, now that I'm middle age and I decided I was going to do this, and I said I can actually be a doctor of this, and then sadly, Dr. Ruth passed this, recently, and I'm like, well, maybe it's just all meant to be. I'm just a continuation of that journey, but I want to be that person where people say, oh, that was Dr. Ruth. Dr. Brenda is, she's not ashamed to say she likes sex. In fact, my goal in the next year is to write a book, and my working title is "I love sex, and so should you." Because why not? Like, why shouldn't I love it? It doesn't. It's not a bad thing. Um, it's only the perception of the person who wants to claim that it's a bad thing. We're putting that spin on it here. So I want to remove that and be that, you know, that doctor that talks about pleasure and isn't afraid to say it. And it makes you feel okay that you feel it too, because we're
Yeah.
all going to feel it.
I love that. I love that story that you shared about Dr. Ruth. I do remember Dr. Ruth,
Yeah.
so I love it.
And nobody called her, shamed her, or called her
No.
dirty or anything.
Yeah.
Like, she was well respected, and,
Yeah.
she didn't hold back about what she wanted to speak about. And so she is definitely the person that I like look to and got an inspiration from.
Yeah. And I love your working title of your book. I think that's amazing and I love it. I can't wait for it to come out.
Well, thanks.
Um,
Hopefully it will be sooner rather than later.
yeah. Yeah, I do want to go just I just lo- I this has been such a great conversation. I've loved this so much because there is, I mean, it is still hard for a lot of people to like be okay with wanting sex, to be okay with saying that they enjoy it. Like especially, and I think it's really for women, especially, I mean, because I think men don't really have an issue with it. I could be
Well,
wrong, but
men do actually.
do
I've
they?
just personally focused on women because
Mhm.
that's who I've spent the majority of my life coaching and resonating
Mhm.
with the most.
Mhm.
And I feel like um, I can make the greatest impact with that population. And
Yeah.
so that's where I've chosen to send my focus. But, there's we're all just trying to navigate this thing called life. And so there's no judgment here. And actually, I've had a lot of men open up to me because they know I'm not judging them and not going to, hold them, in a bad light if they tell me that they like something or don't like something or something happened to them. And there's a lot of repression that men do. They
Mhm.
uh, just don't allow us to see it unless
Mm.
you soften and invite them to let them show you.
Oh, interesting. That is interesting because I think in the, when you think of like the general, like in media and things like that, it seems like, men don't have this issue that women have around. It's okay to like want sex, to talk about sex, to, want pleasure and things like that. So I like that perspective. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah,
So I do want to sort of start to wrap up the conversation. I've
sure.
really enjoyed talking with you, but is there any final words that you'd like to say? Any last message that you'd like to share with our audience today?
I think for me, it's just about having everyone slow down. Just a little bit every day. Take a breath, feel your body, feel your feelings, feel yourself. It doesn't have to be sexual. Feel your cheeks, feel your arms, feel a sensation, and not just acknowledge it, but actually sit with it and notice it. Because when you can do that, it allows you to connect on a deeper level with others. And that deep connection with others is going to allow us to evolve into a more connected species instead of a disconnected, disjointed world that we could end up in if we're not careful. So just asking everyone to just get in their bodies, feel their bodies, have sex and like it, and not be ashamed to say that you do. And don't be ashamed if you don't like something. And don't be afraid to say that either.
Oh, I love that. And I love the message that you have around just reconnecting. Because I think today it's hard for some people to connect because they have been disconnected for the last few years. And people are starting to try to reconnect. And it seems like it's a struggle for some. So I love the message of just sitting in your body, because that just, sitting in your body and feeling your own body will help you with connecting with others. So thank you for sharing that.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. This was a blast. I had so much fun.
Yeah, it's been great. Thank you so much again for being on with me today. I invite you to subscribe to the Embrace, Balance, Discover Joy podcast and join our community. If you feel inspired by what you hear, please leave a review and share this podcast with others who might benefit. And remember, it's never too late to embrace balance and discover joy in your life. Stay tuned for our upcoming episodes filled with inspiring stories and valuable insights. Until next time, take care and be kind to yourself.